on in this video. So let's jump on in and let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Going back to Unit 6, we looked at relational fixes there. In particular, the relational fix "ya," which means pertaining to, and we saw that with nouns. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to see how they can be prefixed to verbs and what they mean there, and they have several different meanings and different uses. It corresponds to the English relative clause who, which, or that. And I want to draw your attention to note 10.1.1 here at the upper left corner, particularly that first part of that sentence, that first line, "B'timirte betu wist yamiganyut." It's referring to Tamarioch here, which is the students. But as you see in the translation, it's specifically referring to the students that can be found, who can be found, or who are found in the school, in this school. And that's what we're going to really be focusing on in this video. So that subordinate clause. As you can see a little further down below, you have a couple examples that show how these prefixes can be attached to verbs in the perfective form, as in yefalagu, pertaining to my having wanted, as well as the short imperfective verb forms with the prefix yam or yummy. And we see the example here, yamafalag, pertaining to my wanting. And going to the next page here, you get a couple of examples of how this can be used in a couple of different forms and how it refers in a corresponding way analogous to the use with nouns. So yamata, he who came; yamatach, she who came; yamimatu, they who are coming; and yamatsach, you, feminine, singular, who are giving. With transitive verbs, these prefixes can refer either to the subject or the object of the verb. So to look at, again, this next section of page 108, yafalagu can either mean I who wanted, referring to the subject, or that thing, that direct object, which I wanted. So it can refer to either one of those. When it's used as a modifier, it's going to agree in gender and number with the noun that it's modifying. So if we look at those three sentences in the middle of the page there, so man or person is the noun here, and yami mata is what's modifying it. And so mata, being third person masculine singular, agrees there with so. So yami mata, so is a person who is coming. So that's where you get that modification in there. If the modified noun is definite, then we're gonna see the definite suffix affixed to the relative construction. So as you can see in the example there, yami hedo, that W at the end there, tamari, the student who is leaving. And notice there that it's not going on the student, but it's going on the modifier. Just like we saw something analogous to that with the nouns, where when the noun was being modified, it was the prefix was going on, moving back to the adjective that was modifying it. Here, it's moving back to the verb that's modifying it. And if it's a feminine noun, the definite suffix that goes on the modifier can either be masculine or feminine. So keep that in mind. Next point to look at is that the relative construction can take on an object. And if that object is definite or specific, then it's going to have the object suffix affixed to that noun, that object. On the relative construction itself, you may or may not have the verb suffix pronoun used in apposition. And if you remember, go back to unit 5 and no 5.4 to see how you have those kind of double definite suffix uses there to kind of just add emphasis. So to look at these examples below, you have Masafun, which is the book. So that's the object, it's definite. And then you can either have Yafalagut or Yafalagu. So that's the point there. So Masafun, Yafalagut, and the book that I am the one who wanted the book. Or you can have Masafun, Yafalagu, and. So the point there is, again, Masafun is going to have the definite suffix because it's a definite object, but Yafalagut, the relative construction, may or may not have that definite suffix, that T there on Yafalagut or Yafalagu without the definite suffix. The relative construction itself can actually be an object of another verb. And in those instances, it's going to always be a direct, a definite object. And we're going to have the object, that definite object suffix, affixed to it. And again, the verb suffix pronoun may or may not be affixed to the principal verb. So here in this example, Yefalagoin is, we see that was a relative construction that we've been looking at. Here it's being used itself as the object of agenyo. He found it. What is it? It's what he wanted. He found it, or he found what he wanted. So Yefalagoin, being the definite object, is going to have that object suffix, the in ending. And then agenyo or agenya can be used either way, with or without the verb suffix pronoun attached at the end there. When it's being used in the negative, the relative construction is not going to have the suffix, but it will have that prefix that we've seen before, like with alfaligum. So you see here, yamalfaligo, masaf. So it has that al prefix that we've seen before, but not the suffix. Other prefixes can be attached to the relative construction, and when it is, we're going to see the ya or yami dropped. So when we have, in this example, they use the prefix la, to, and lataraut, so nagarhut. So I told it to the person that I called. Yataraut. So it's kind of another way to kind of describe that relative construction. The person whom I invited, I told it to him. This part here is going to be a little bit complex, but we'll just kind of go through it. And the point here is that if the object in the relative clause is itself modified, then the relative construction can have 3 different variants. And so to read this, you look at the perfective on the left-hand side where you see Tilukun Beit Ayahut, I saw the big house, just a direct sentence. Then on the right-hand side here, you have a couple of 3 different uses of a relative construction and the different ways that the meaning can be understood depending on word order and the emphasis. So number 1, we see Tilukun Beit Yahut Anening. It is I who saw the big house, versus Yahut Beit Tilukno. The house that I saw is big. Versus yet again, Yahut Tilukun Beit No. What I saw is the big house. So those are 3 different kind of variants depending on where the relative construction kind of comes into the sentence. And my takeaway from that is that it's a question of emphasis. These 3 sentences are related, but can have slightly different meanings depending on what you're trying to draw attention to. That's 10.1. Now we go to 10.2, where we look at the affix inde. This has a few different meanings, like, such as soon as, that, according to, in the same way as. Again, these are prefixed to nouns, pronouns, and modifiers. And there's 4 different uses that we're going to see in this unit. All of these, no, these will be, because these can be used with nouns and verbs. So we'll see a couple uses with nouns and a couple with verbs. But there's going to be 4 different applications of this. So with the first one, it takes on the meaning like, in the same manner as, in the same way as, or according to. And these get affixed to, this particular use gets affixed to nouns, pronouns, and their modifiers. So to look at the example at the top of page 111, Indene Yamaral. So Yamaral, he studies, and then Indene is like me. And that's, you got Inda affixed to the personal pronoun ene, first person singular. The second use also gets used or affixed to a noun, but it's used as in a phrase with the verb yalla, and it could be yalla, yallich, yalu, depending on the situation, according to the person and the number. And as we see in this example, Indabatu yalla so aiganyam. There's no person like his father. So Indabatu is like the father. And then it's used with yalla. So the father there being third person masculine singular, then we see yalla. In that next sentence, we see Inda masafoch. So we have third person plural because it's multiple things. So we have yalu. And then Inda hitu, which is Hitu's sister. So that's third person feminine singular. And so we have yalich to agree with that in gender and number. Then we get to the third use where it means as soon as or as. These get prefixed to verbs in the perfective form, and it describes the completion of an action. But it could also be used to in a sentence with either a main verb in the perfective or imperfective. So the completion of the action is going to take place either in the past or in the future. And we look at the principal verb to tell us, to give us a context to know which one it is. So, in the nagaran bete hedala. I will go home as soon as he tells me, or as soon as you tell me, excuse me. So because it's a hedalo in the imperfective, it's going to be in the future, I will go home. Or excuse me, it's when you tell me. And hetku is the perfective form, so it's happening in the past. So in this context, it's going to be I will go home, or I went home as soon as you told me. So with the imperfective, it was when you tell me. With the perfective is when you told me in the past. So that's giving you the context there. Then finally, the last use is inda with a relative construction, and it means that. And so inda can be affixed to a relative construction. As we saw earlier, it replaces the ya or yummy prefix, and it produces a subordinate clause in connection with the verbs, meaning say, tell, or know. And as we see in the example here, looking at that first sentence, what abate in deheda nagarin. So nagarin, I like to work it backwards. Nagarin, he told me. Well, what did he tell me? He told me that he left in deheda. And where did he go? What abate? Went towards home. So Oh, and something that's important to know here too is that if it takes on a definite object, then again, the verb suffix, like in this third line here, lejun, the child, indayo, nagarin. Indayo, again, can be either indayo or indaya with that W. That verb suffix pronoun may or may not be there, but since it's a definite object, lejun, with that N ending, we're going to see that there definitely because it's a definite object, but the verb suffix pronoun is optional. So lejun and dayo nagarin. He told me that he saw what? The child. And that finishes out. Or actually one more. I just yeah, builds on what I said there. Just kind of expands on it. Again, you can see how the object is going to take this definite subject as a definite suffix, but you may or may not have the verb suffix pronoun on the verb. So looking at that example, yihin beit indagazachu aukalo. Indagazachu, obviously with the verb suffix pronoun. I know that she bought it. What is it? It's yihin beit, this house. And here, even with beit, that's also being modified. It's not just the house, but this house. And so the definite suffix goes back to the modifier. So yihin beit is the object. Indagazachu is the relative construction with the verb suffix pronoun. Indagazach, the same relative construction, just without the verb suffix pronoun. And the other examples show the same thing. All right, so that finishes out Unit 10 now, and we'll head on to Unit 11. Thanks for joining me on this.